Okay, check 1, 2. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Winners and Losers radio program from, July the 12th, 2024. Or is it 2050? Doesn't matter. I don't know. Anyway, welcome this morning. We're broadcasting here from a virtual studio, but a combination of Shepherdstown and Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And this morning, we can talk about anything we want. There's a lot of stuff, but however, I've been hearing about the more and more about the solar farm plap, and I call it. And I know John. I mentioned it to John, and he had something to contribute on this. We'll see. And I'll just say that I got a pretty strong feeling we're headed into another mud fight that's going to end up Trump wins. But John, tell me what you think. There's a big solar farm project, a pilot project. That's obviously been cooking for several years, and now it's a fait accompli, and people are upset about it for a number of reasons. It's too long. Tax cuts. They're apparently unsatisfied with the amount of taxes that whoever the company is will pay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, what do you got to contribute on this matter? Everybody's getting all riled up about it. There was a standing only room meeting in Shepherdstown, and I think there'll be one in Charlestown too if they haven't had it already. And what do you think? Is this important or not?
I have a total of 15 acres just outside of Shepherdstown. This is 15 acres that my father and grandfather owned back in 1947. I had to buy back the property that they sold in 1952, and one of the things was a field, a 5-acre field. Now, this is a field with no electricity, no water, no nothing. It's a farm field across the road from my house. I don't know how much my father sold it, probably for next to nothing back in 70 plus years ago. I had to pay $315,000 for that field. It's a farm field, but I had to pay, and the reason I had to pay that was because the developers, and you know who I'm talking about, wanted to put 6 or 8 houses on it. This is Jefferson County. This is not Shepherdstown. It's just right outside of Shepherdstown, but Jefferson, $315,000, and that was a bargain. The developers were actually offering more, but the guy I bought it from, the family, is the family we sold it to in 1952. So he was trying to give me a good deal at $315,000, and I had to pay that to protect it from it becoming a housing development. Now, this is the way some of us feel about rampant development going on around here. Some of us feel like to pay that kind of cost. I could have turned it into a solar farm. I actually thought about that. Decided not to, and decided I'd let a farmer, a Jamaican guy, plant some crops on it. And he's doing very well, very, very successful. And now it's a farm field again. It is a real farm field. And I'm going to keep it that way as long as I can. I'm trying to do a conservation easement on the property. But this is the kind of expense we sometimes have to go to. I personally feel it is much safer if I converted it to if it's a conservation easement, it's protected, fine. And that, of course, drops the value down to about 1/3 of its original value. 1/3. That's just what a conservation easement does to a piece of property. That is, if you want to give it to your family and they want to sell it, they're going to get 1/3 the amount they would have if you hadn't converted it to a conservation easement. I could have put a solar panel field there, could have done that. It was an option, but if I had let the developers take it, they would have chopped it up into many pieces for many different houses, and then that's permanent. That never gets changed. You can't buy back each one of those pieces of property. If it's a solar farm, it's still an intact piece of property. It doesn't get chopped up. It's left as a solar farm. It also earns money for the owner, some money. I don't know the numbers of that. I've heard all the numbers about, oh, the electricity is going so well. If it's a farm field, the farm produce is going to other places too outside of Jefferson County. Okay, if you grow a crop on that field, you're not going to sell the stuff in Jefferson County. You're going to sell it outside, probably interstate. And this guy takes his stuff to Baltimore and to Washington. Okay, so this business of, if it's a solar farm and we're just giving our electricity to Maryland or someplace, who cares? Because the farm field will be exactly the same. Now, if it's turned into development, you've got to add increased transport. You have to improve the roads so you have higher traffic. You have to improve the schools for all the kids living there. You have to improve the electricity and the water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A burden for everyone around. There are just so many reasons. I mean, I admit, driving by a solar farm, it's a little ugly, okay? But I don't think nearly as ugly as these ghastly 2x4 framed, Tyvek wrapped, horrible houses that they're building in large numbers in these housing communities with no trees, no landscaping, nothing, just these houses. I would rather see a solar farm rather than see that foolishness. Okay, that's kind of summarized.
Yeah. Go ahead, Karen. You got a big smile on your face.
Karen, you're on mute. Karen,
yeah, you're muted, dear. Muted.
So yes, I absolutely agree. I think the design and quality of these new developments is important. You know, we don't even have to go there. We all know that. And it is sad for our landscape to add what will become, you know, not sustainable structurally housing. But as far as the solar fields, you know, aesthetically, they really don't bother me. You know, they are a sign of progress, in my opinion. But I think the issue that stands here is that we have to. I'm glad, Dr. Aldis, that you brought that up, because there is a great comparison, an elephant in the room, that is the same breaks that we have given to these developers that are causing the problems of mass development in our county. We have to be careful not to do this same thing with solar farms. These are, you know, businesses, money-making businesses. They are profitable, and the county has to get their act together on residential construction as well as solar construction or any other type of construction. We have to have a consensus and a plan, a structure within for everybody to understand and to work within that does give money back. We cannot continue giving breaks to the developers, whether it be for solar or housing. And I think that is the biggest contention here. I do know that, you know, people just are resistant to, you know, the view sheds and things like that. But I'm in a complete agreement. There is nothing beautiful about these new housing developments. So, I like that you brought them up as a comparison, because I think it's more the infrastructure rules and guidelines that are so skewed in our county right now. Some of that due to our dysfunction in county government over the past several years.
Yeah, my problem with plans, I'm all for plans. We definitely need a plan. We definitely need something set out as how we want it to be, and a plan that takes the long-range future into account. However, plans become simply a stake in the ground, allowing developers, or allowing the most money, and allowing the companies for solar farms.
You froze up a little bit there, John. Uh-oh. You may have to reconnect. Poor guy. John, you're froze up there.
All we have is an action photo.
Yeah,
Still
right.
shot.
Okay. And he looks a little bit like Biden in the news conference there, but well, so do I.
John.
Well, we'll let him reconnect.
I hope well, let me hold this thought until he does reconnect, because I do have a couple of facts to throw out just concerning. I did some fact finding because
Good.
I didn't want to function just on our opinions and speculation and
Well, go ahead. He's going to reconnect. He'll reconnect. It's okay.
John, we should have a disclosure that opinions expressed here today are not
not necessarily those of Enlighten Radio, which has no opinion about anything. Okay, it's just.
Yeah, we should come up with a clever public service announcement.
But well, let me list before John comes back on and tries to reconnect. Let me just read John Aldis. Dr. John Aldis has been very active in our community for a long time. Been on the show before too, many times, and he's been very active in addiction treatment in the county. And matter of fact, has played a pretty heroic role in trying to advocate for medically based treatments for addiction rather than tough love philosophy, whatever that goes in some places. So, I did some, the process of development. You can have a plan, but it's driven entirely by developers. Because nobody else, other than the public building stuff themselves, is going to build anything at all. And here's the other problem: is that if it's a corporation that's listed on a stock exchange, they are prohibited. Well, they're not prohibited, but they won't engage in negotiations in public. Well, quote, public as much. And the reason is because, here's John. You come back in. Shepherdstown bandwidth. Maybe that's what we're talking about here. Hi, John. Maybe you were a victim of Shepherdstown bandwidth there.
I don't know if it's just my internet went down or my whole electricity goes down, which shuts down my internet.
Yeah, that does happen.
It happens here, too. Well, anyway, so I was going through just a little bit of the background on development. Okay, before I know Karen has a comment she wants to make about what you were saying. So these corporations come in, and the Securities and Exchange Commission encourages them to not engage in public debates because it will create a lot of volatility related to the stock price. It will. If you have a public debate about something, they're going to pay $10 million of taxes, they're going to pay none, they're going to do the deal, they're not, blah, 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 all this stuff that happens in public. Well, all of a sudden the stock price starts to if it's a big development project, and so they don't do it. None of these big corporations that are on they won't do it at all. So, hold on.
That's my point.
The point is the development commissions in Jefferson County have the responsibility to carry out these negotiations. And the deal is done pretty much before it ever gets put before the county commission. So you have a real problem about how you're going to...
And by a plan, that's what I mean. We need a fiscal plan. And there should be a fiscal structure that is not... I don't mean a plan as bureaucratic red tape that everybody has to try to crawl through. I mean a fiscal plan across the board. These developers should know the structure, the fiscal structure, and what the return our county is expecting from their development within the county. And, it would wipe out, a lot of the dirty backroom deals that happen. And, one company gets this without paying anything, and the other company's paying out the wazoo. But I know all the developers are making bank right now off of this county. And so where I think Jefferson County has dropped the ball is in a fiscal plan. So I should make that clear. Like, we should have a structure, just like there is a tax code. There's a structure, and the county should be knowing when these companies come in, if they're bringing in this amount of projected revenue and this amount of guaranteed jobs, then, this would be the tier, the percentage, the tax percentage they come, that they fall within, or the impact fees. And then if they don't meet those guidelines, those are revisited, and if they don't meet those guidelines, there would be penalties. We have to start acting more like the corporations so that our county has the revenue to pay our teachers, to keep our schools up, to keep our roads up. It's just how it works. And we haven't had anybody at the county level kind of taking the lead on the fiscal responsibility of all of this development.
But the federal government has already said, you corporations are not to talk about it. And how do we as a county tell the federal government to back off on that? John, am I saying that correctly? It's
not the federal government. It is. The Security and Exchange Commission encourages them not to induce volatility, unnecessarily about the value of companies. And I don't know whether it's a law, but as a rule, nobody listed on the stock exchanges that comes in is going to engage in a political fight locally over the details of the deal. I mean, except in like they do right now. I mean, they have confidential stuff. You can't even get the chair of the Development Commission to tell everybody on the Development Commission what the deal is in Berkeley County. According to JB, he was on the Berkeley County Development Commission for a while. And, he couldn't get any information. He says, maybe JB doesn't always pay close attention as he should. I don't know. But the point being is that it's not easy, to find out the details if somebody's doing it. There's a gigantic development going on the other side of Ranson there, right near where the emergency building is behind there. It's huge. Doesn't look like housing to me, by the way. That looks like warehousing or something. But so, who do you call to find out what the deal really is, and what's a fair deal? Now, how many jobs are involved in the solar farm project? Does anybody know?
Who is it?
How many jobs?
Okay, so Wild Hill Solar wants a $260 million pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes, $260 million to bring 4 permanent jobs to Jefferson County. After the construction, now during the construction phase, there would be, hundreds of jobs. But once that solar farm is up and running, it is 4 permanent jobs to Jefferson County, and they want a $260 million pilot.
Now, what does that mean? They want to be relieved of $260 million in taxes. Is that what you're saying?
Payment in lieu of taxes. That's what pilot means.
They want to pay. Who's going to pay? Who's paying what? Who's paying? The company's paying?
They would get a tax break of $260 million.
All right.
To bring 4 permanent
over how many years?
They want that over 10 years, approximately 10 to 12 years.
Okay, so they get a tax break for 10 years, and then after that they pay? And it's a
direct comparison to what, John Aldis said about, the developers coming in. And that is why we're in the pickle we're in. And if we open the door to these types of deals, the people that are going to lose are the residents of the county.
Well, what are they going to do if nobody develops? Who wins then?
Well, that's not an option.
Yes, it is. Yeah, sure it is. You can just raise the bar to investment above whatever the median is, and they won't invest. Nobody will. It's a market. It's capitalism.
Yeah, but I also look at it esoterically. You have places that have very strict guidelines, and those are really desirable places to live.
They're
So,
also very expensive.
right. But if you, I do believe there are communities that are getting it right, that are absolutely getting it right. There's a solar farm down in like outside of Clarksville, Maryland. And I mean, Maryland is one state we could look at that really has done this well with balancing the tax breaks and the farmland. And they have embraced the solar farms that allow for small livestock farming within the solar farm. So the solar panels actually provide shade for either ducks or chickens or sheep or goats, and they're raised up a little bit higher, but it's a combination of farming and solar farming, and there are communities across the country that are figuring this out, and it becomes profitable for everybody. You're not, quote unquote, losing your farmland. Farmers can still farm, and I think we as a community have to start thinking, more openly about how to manage this problem that with the farmland. I mean, Dr. Aldis, I applaud you for buying that property back. I absolutely love seeing it being farmed. I absolutely love seeing it being farmed by people of color. I mean, it's so vibrant to drive by and see that field being, hand plowed and nurtured every day. So kudos to you. I'm really happy that you did that. But unfortunately, not everybody thinks the way you do.
So what's next on this? I mean, in other words, is there? I mean, I'm told that you really can't revisit it. It either goes or it doesn't go. So it's either this or nothing.
Yeah, the company is they're dangling the carrot, and they say they're pulling out in 6 to 8 weeks if the county, they're trying to heavy-hand it. If we don't agree to it, they're gone. They're going somewhere else.
How much is the actual investment? Do you know?
Pardon me?
How big is the actual investment?
I do not have those numbers. I was trying to get my hands on some of that before we came on, but I'll keep doing
you have a name, you have the company's name? What's it called?
Wild Hill Solar.
Oh, Wild Hill. Oh, I'm going to call them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered at 10 years, 260 million. See, that's.
Yeah, so
it must be a pretty big investment.
To understand about the pilot, so it stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes. That's the acronym. And it was passed by West Virginia legislature about a dozen years ago, about 12 years ago. And there are several other states that have these laws,
right,
and they do a lot better than we are doing with them, frankly.
How do you judge whether it's... But how do you decide?
The concept is that the business will bring large numbers of permanent jobs to states, and then they're excused of some tax burden for that trade-off, and that the additional jobs would provide continued
income,
revenue into the tax-based system.
Right.
So that's the fiscal. That's how they justified passing this bill fiscally. 12 years ago in the West Virginia state.
Right.
And there have been some that have worked really well, like the steel company down in Mason County, I think Nucor Steel. They promised to bring like at least 600 jobs at $60,000 per year. And for Mason County, that's huge. And, so that ended up being kind of a good example of how the pilot works, and it allows for these types of corporate developments but it also improves the community and the tax base within the community.
Switching back to the housing developments, do people say that a huge housing development increases permanent jobs? Yes, to build the houses, yes. But after that, I would think in most cases, a huge housing development increases unemployment. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. And it increases burden on our resources.
Yes, exactly. In a long range thing, I think it does unemployment, not employment. The opposite.
Why do you say that?
Okay, these people, when they move there, they don't have jobs automatically. They have to get jobs. They're unemployed when they move there.
Well, is that true? I mean, there's a lot of, we're the ex-urban territory of Washington, D.C. and so if you're working in the city, you could easily have a job and then move out here to get a little cheaper property than and maybe lower taxes than you might get in Maryland or Loudoun County. So I'm not sure they're all got to get a job when they. And I'm not sure. You might be right. I think the composition is you got a lot of retirees, plus you got a lot of people that are working not locally. And one of the problems is that, I mean, what's a quality investment? I mean, Rockwell came here and everybody, practically, had a stroke. And they fulfilled all their promises. They promised 250 jobs, and that's exactly what they got, and they're going to have more. So I don't know. What's the, what passes and, uh-oh, who's calling me? There we go. I don't know what the guideline is supposed to be. Who do you want to move here? And are your children going to work here, or are they going to have to move because there's no jobs that pay? I mean, the only jobs that pay decent money. What's that? High tech jobs? Well, I'm sorry, the public education system you have here, you're not getting any high tech jobs. You're not. So
that's exactly the point, John, is that we have to make these companies pay. We can't keep giving them breaks, giving them our resources, giving them our land, because it does break down the moral fabric of a community, and part of that fabric is a good education system. It takes money. We need their taxes instead of giving them breaks.
Well, they wouldn't pay the taxes that they would have to pay would have to be to the state for salaries, for example. All the salaries for teachers are governed by the state, not the county.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, you have to bargain with the company's got to, it's their money. If they're going to bargain to pay as little taxes as possible, and you're going to bargain to try to get the investment in your community, somebody's doing it's going to be a bargaining thing
and that's
every
why
time.
We need a structure. That's exactly my point. There has to be a stop.
How do you get a structure?
It takes me back to when I was building my house, and during a time that the impact fee for a property owner that was building on their own land back then was close to, it was $13,000. It was $13,000 something. It's just to get your building permit. The impact fee was so high. And what does the county do? They're allowing developers to come in and not pay impact fees at all. But people that are already lifelong residents of the county, working here, raising families here, are paying these exorbitant impact fees. And then they did get, they did change the impact fee and made it nothing. And I'm like, well, no, I think everybody should pay something. I should pay something, but the developers should be paying too. So we've seesawed. We have, Jefferson County has whiplash in policy. We go from just ridiculous policy to no policy, and that's what I'm saying. We've got to get our act together and put into place some structures by which everybody is going to follow.
So how do you get the political consequence that you want? In other words, okay, so you're basically saying to vote down to kill this project, and then the lesson would be is that a better deal needs to be negotiated. How does that lesson get politically real? I mean, what happened? Who has to get unelected to make it happen? I mean, and what has to happen? See, otherwise, I don't see how anything changes. What I'm afraid of is that it gets killed. Nothing happens in terms of the change, except that the liberals get blamed for costing jobs. Okay, and I understand that union people showed up at that hearing in Jefferson County, okay, to testify in favor of this. A bunch of them from work.
I understand, and there was also a Republican. There was a Republican that basically voiced an opinion that said, "You know what? We're not ready to say yes to this because we need to revisit this and come up with a structure that we understand, so that the next time it comes along." So, All right. People are paying attention. People are listening, and being reactive is usually not going to benefit the whole, the common good, and that's what this situation has become. It's been a very volatile, reactive situation where we need to rise above and look at it from afar and say, okay, this makes sense. We need this type of development. I agree with Dr. Aldis. I'd rather see a solar farm than this 2x4 houses. Let's find a way to make this county very viable in a economic, business community as well as a residential community. Everybody needs to pay their fair share.
I think part of the problem in trying to discuss this is a very large number of people. Solar farms, no. Just, they stop it right there. So what's the next option? Next option is a housing development. I mean, that's kind of where we're now. Your idea of using solar farms to allow for more farming of goats and sheep and small husbandry, yeah, that's a clever idea. That's a good idea. Let's soften the negative impacts of solar farms. Mm-hmm. But people want to jump directly from, okay, no solar farms, let's make it housing development. My problem is a housing development creates huge numbers of problems when it comes to overdevelopment, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Solar farm doesn't do any of that. It creates a fairly ugly looking field. I agree. Okay. If you want to plant a few trees around it and make it look nicer, that's also important, would be good. But I'm one of these people who say housing and development, no.
Right.
Maybe that makes me just as bad as them. I don't know.
Do you think that there should be, Len Windmeyer used to advocate for a denser housing development plan that allowed a lot of green space, but you would have, more apartment. Well, even if there were condos, they would be more denser.
Well, you would designate your density, and then surrounding that high density would be green space. I mean, that's a very common practice in a lot of sprawl, where you save vast pieces of land and keep the development, in a denser, footprint. So, I mean, that works, but implementing it in the county is very difficult.
It still has the same infrastructure demand.
Of course it does. You're exactly right.
And again, solar farms don't. So.
Well, the other question is that, okay, so I think we need to get somebody on here from one of the development commissions, or maybe a past member. Maybe if they're a current member, they can't say anything or something. But because I'd like to understand the process better. I mean, for example, if the deal had been $160 million instead of $260 million, would that be a good deal or a bad deal too? I mean, I'm having a hard time telling, what concessions you're going to make for what gains, and
John, I completely agree, and that's what I'm saying. Like, don't we have a county economist? Don't we have somebody that can study these and say
they could hire Carol?
No,
Carol's a regional economist. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to. I mean, there's obviously a process of discussion and negotiation. Somebody has a lead. I think my understanding is that most of the leads for development come from the state, because some company is thinking about investing, and they contact the state development authority usually first, okay, or the governor, or if they have a political friend, whatever. But that goes through the state development authority, and then it's referred to different regions or whatever based on what's what they really want, and then the discussions begin, and they're held in confidence. Now, the development authority is appointed by the county commission. Okay, and I think there's always at least one commission member that's a member of it. I think that's true in Jefferson County for sure. I know Walt Pellish was a member of it when he ran through the Ranson thing, So, yeah, I think we need to get we need to understand, what is the change that needs to be made, and what change is possible. I mean, you're dealing with, you're not going to get away from dealing with private corporations. And by the way, you're not going to have anybody that's only going to sell in West Virginia. By the way, that's stupid, okay? Because you can't tax anything you tax that's totally internal in terms of an economic transaction is just a zero-sum gain, okay? You're taking money from one person to another. The only way, the only resource you can tax that is a gain for everybody is something you export, either to other states or other countries. That's why when you export energy and you tax it, or you export coal and you tax, right now, by the way, the untaxed value of coal is almost, going out of the country, is almost $11 billion a year. Not taxed at all. Okay?
It's
not
criminal.
Taxed at all. And we're talking about, pennies in these other industries. So, you have to figure out a ways that, where can you get revenue from something? You can't tax healthcare. Most people in the state are working in healthcare, with more people than anybody else, and you can't tax it because it's half subsidies anyway. All right, you can't tax retail, because who are you taxing when you tax retail? You're taxing the working class of West Virginia, and they cannot afford to pay any more taxes. They can't. They're poor, 80% of them. And so...
and that's precisely why these developers should, in my opinion, should...
They should, but you got to... we have to know what the detail is.
Because they're building crap.
The profit margins, for example, in manufacturing aren't that big. I mean, they're about the national average. It's about a 60-40 thing, But they are net taxable profits, okay, and surplus, because you're not taking it from anybody else, when you tax their products. If you tax something that's just traded internally, you're not really making any money out of that, okay? You're taking from, it's a zero sum. But we need to get somebody on it. We didn't understand it better, about who needs to be appointed to the Development Commission to determine whether the principles you're advocating are actually doable or practical or real, and maybe it should be. I mean, we got to find out. You got to get the company to say yes, I'll pay that money. I mean, haven't spent 25 years negotiating with corporations. I can tell you, it's nothing new. Most of the time, you gotta put the pressure on them to get them to tell you the truth, because they're trying to do it as cheap as possible. But anyway, I don't know.
I think it also comes down to a general, self-respect. The county and our landscape in the Eastern Panhandle, we should respect it enough to do the hard work, and we should expect it enough to, or respect it enough to not give it away, not give away our natural resources, not give away the future educations of our children. We need to stand up for ourselves more in the Eastern Panhandle, and I think there's just been too much rape and pillage from developers, and that's not a Democrat or Republican thing or a liberal and conservative thing. It comes down to just the very fabric of how your community should feel about itself.
Well, someone's agreeing to all these deals, Karen. I mean, the company, you can't blame the company for proposing to pay no taxes. You know, if I was running the company, I would too.
I put the onus on our county. I put the onus on us.
All right. Let's find out, you know, who's giving it away, and are they really giving it away? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure the choices are as clear as you think they are, but we'll see.
John and Karen, I'm going to have to quit here soon. My wife does these Tai Chi classes here at home, and next one starts at 9:30, and I've got to help her prepare for that.
I know. I feel so frustrated by these
wonderful.
questions.
You need some Tai Chi after this conversation.
Yeah.
I do yoga. She does Tai Chi. So if she doesn't do any yoga and I don't do any Tai Chi,
You know.
we're fully in agreement on that.
Right. Anyway, well, thank you, John, so much for participating in this. You know, I got to. What's it called? Wildflower?
Wild Hill.
Wild Hill Solar?
Wild Hill Solar, yeah.
I'm going to try to we got to get somebody from one of these commissions on that understands the process. You know, there's something wrong with the process.
We will work on it. And Dr. Aldis, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your conservation work in the county.
Sort of the commissions usually have rules that they're not allowed to talk about it one-on-one. That's my impression of these big groups. That if you're there making these decisions, you're not allowed to make individual discussions, which is really unfortunate. And we just need it for information. So maybe not someone on the commission, but someone who was recently on it.
Right, a past member. Yeah, like that. Yeah, I think that would be. We just need to understand the process better.
I understand this whole thing so much better after this last 45 minutes here. This has been, for me, an incredibly useful discussion. Karen, especially, I like your insight. You're obviously woke enough that I can have a decent discussion. And John, of course, is John. He's always helpful. So, two good people to talk to.
All right, pal. Well,
Thank
everybody,
you.
we'll be back next week,
everybody.
same time, with the same level of confusion, and we'll hope that we're going to see if we can get the summer a little hotter than it already is. How's that? You know. All right. Take care, everybody. It's
Bye,
late,
everybody.
but everything comes next.